Hey, Auntie, hey. Question. Do you take pleasure in making your partner or husband the center of your life, even before the children? And maybe you are ruled by Hera, the goddess of marriage. Now, within your household, the children know that daddy comes first. The children know that daddy gets served dinner first and he always gets the biggest piece of chicken. Other people get the message too that you have to check in with your husband first and put other people on hold. When you were young, you probably played house a lot. You got up and you had your dollhouse and you pretend cook dinner, setting up the table, cleaning up in your dollhouse, waiting for daddy to come home. And then you took your Ken doll and served him and bought him his slippers and dressed him up in his pajamas, put him in his little easy chair. Even if you grew up in a household with two parents that was less than ideal, you still had an idealized image of marriage and, sought it out for yourself. When you but if your parents had a good marriage, you probably dreamed of that yourself. But if they didn't have such a good marriage, then you still probably dreamed of something better. Now, growing up, you probably stayed in a relationship. You probably always had a boyfriend. You was always going steady. You wore his leather jacket. You wore his ring, his necklaces. You also hooked up with other couples, and you daydreamed a lot about your wedding, writing your name with his last name, Mr. and Mrs. such and such, or Mrs. Bob Smith, whatever it is. Always had a boyfriend. Just because you like being in a partnership doesn't necessarily mean that you will be in a relationship with anyone. Who he is matters. So if you were in school, he was probably a class officer, a president of a club, a varsity football player, probably maybe an assistant coach or something like that. He had to be of status. And once you coupled up with other high status classmates and couples, that gave you like an emotional security that you needed. And you probably went on a lot of double dates with these other high status couples. So you might have been a cheerleader, he might have been a varsity football player, or he might have been the president of your class, and you might have been the president of another club. You probably got married right after high school or right after college, and if it went well, you usually went to college to find a mate. Yeah, school was important, but you went there to find you an up and coming young man. And if you didn't find somebody in college, you probably felt like you were doomed to die alone or to be like old hag. So although the other goddesses, the other auntie goddesses, your sisters like Artemis and Athena will probably think that you're giving up your power, you're giving your power away to a man, but you are deeply attracted to marriage and partnership and do not want to live alone or work alone. You instinctively want to be mated, and some women feel powerful single, like Artemis and Persephone. They feel powerful single, but as a Hera auntie, you feel powerful in a relationship, and your identity is tied up into being a wife and a helpmate, and you will always embody that. Having a husband makes you feel complete, and you will complete that in him as well. So you guys will bounce off each other when it comes to this completeness. And you will do anything to make him happy. So if he likes bigger boobs, you'll get a boob job. If he likes bigger butt, you'll probably get a BBL. If he wants you thin, you'll go on a diet, because you have an idealized image of marriage and making your husband happy. And because you're attracted to powerful men, you probably helped him elevate to whatever position he is in. And there are two things you would really like to have in a marriage. You want partnership and equality. And you want every bit of accolades that he comes across, because you do not mind sacrificing your own ambitions for his, because your husband will most likely be like the mayor or the founder of a mega church, so you'll be first lady, on the city council, own several businesses. He may be a CEO, a CFO, an attorney, or a judge. You like very powerful men. And you'll follow along and you'll brag about him at every Christmas party, holiday party, award ceremony, any recognition that he achieved, because it's also a feather in your cap too. You also probably held a lot of dinner parties or barbecues or Super Bowl parties for his co-workers and friends. You were the hostess with the mostest, which you found quite satisfying. And you can boast about your husband and bask in his glory amongst all of his friends. But you were also a keen observer and tapped into your instincts, because you were able to tell your husband who to watch out for, who was a rival, who could he partner with, things like that. You were very observant and looked out for his best interest. So let's talk about work. Like I mentioned, work and school were secondary to relationships. Unlike your Athena sister, who put work and education as her primary. But if you never got married and you were quite successful in your career, you might have felt like you failed. If you were married, then technically your real job is your marriage. What about friendships? Friendships are not usually that important to the heraarchetype. She doesn't have really a best friend, and you prefer to be with your husband most of the time. You did a lot of stuff with your husband, so travel, everyday chores, take care of the kids. Everything you did, you probably did it with your husband. Sexuality. You assumed or probably took the stance that sex and marriage go hand in hand. And you might have even stayed a virgin until marriage, or been very inexperienced before getting married. You probably found sex as something that you do. It's part of the role of being a wife. And you were probably very dutiful about it whenever he wanted it, because that's what a good wife does. A good wife is dutiful in her role. Even if you were dissatisfied in your marriage, you probably weren't going to be the one that files for divorce. Even if he cheated and you were humiliated and abused, you would just endure it, because being treated badly and getting a divorce was inconceivable. And if your husband tried to leave you for another woman, you probably would have deeply resisted and been in some serious denial, because in your mind, no matter who he's with, you will always be the wife, the number one wife too. Now, when it comes to children, you might have had children because, it's a function of your role being a wife. And you may not have had huge maternal instincts, even though you may have been a full-time wife and mother. Your kids probably, once they were grown, probably complained that there was no real warmth in the relationship, and that you may have sacrificed the kids for the best interest of your husband. No matter how disciplined or how hard he may have been on the kids, you probably did not step in between your husband and the kids. So in other words, if the husband was being unduly harsh to the children, yelling at them, or even maybe disciplining them, physical discipline, instead of telling the husband, hey, don't talk to the kids like that, or don't hit them like that, or don't hit them so hard, you would probably told your kids, hey, listen to your father, do what your father says. Your father's only doing this because you didn't listen to him. You always take the side of your husband over everyone. And if the kid does try to stand up for him or herself, again, you've taken the side of the father and, confronted the child about the audacity of not listening to the father, because you're always going to be loyal to dad. So what happens in the middle years for a heraarchetype? How you feel depends on if you were married or not, and to whom. And if you were married and in a stable relationship with your husband, and he, achieved a measurable level of success and position, he probably appreciated you in all the years that you guys have together. On the other hand, if you are unmarried, divorced, or widowed, you might be pretty much miserable. But if your marriage is in trouble, or you're going through some stress, you might be making it worse by being possessive, jealous, or vindictive, further putting the marriage in jeopardy, because you feel there's a amount of stress in the relationship, or you might think that he might be drifting off, or things might not be as good as they used to be, because maybe you're not feeling good about yourself, how you look, or whatever. You feel like you're going through the middle age frumpies, so you might be actually making it worse. If widowed, you may have felt that you lost your role in life, which was being a wife, and it gave you meaning and identity, and you might be feeling insignificant right about now in your middle ages. And if you have not developed other aspects of yourself, you might be depressed and feeling super lonely. So the other aspects would be like creativity, but we'll go a little bit into that. So psychological difficulties. One psychological difficulty the heraarchetype will have is over-identifying with your role as a wife and putting all that meaning in your life to being a wife, picking a husband over your friends, quitting your job, not completing your education, losing interest in what things that you like in your life. So over-identifying with Hera. 2, disproportionate expectations. You might become angry and critical when your idealized version of your husband and he does not fit up or live up to those expectations. 3, being oppressed or the oppressor. If you are unmarried and you may feel incomplete and a failure, or you slipped into a bad marriage, or if your marriage is unstable and he's trying to leave you, you might become bitter and feel, be wounded and nagging. A heraarchetype's greatest hurt is isolation from the greater world, because you so identify with marriage and being fair and supporting your husband's career in your first half of your life, but now you're in your second half of life, you can get caught up into like the narrow confines of just your family and friends. There's no other aspects or views that you can take. It's just all about your family and your immediate friends. And as an eternal moralist, basically you have strong feelings about how the world should be run and how people should behave. But when you have such a limited view, you often get secondhand information. like on social media or through gossip, or even maybe through your husband and your friends. And you may think you know what is really going on, but it's kind of distorted and based on fantasies and psychological projections, which are distorted too, due to your life not really being lived. All right, so how do you grow? As the undisputed family matriarch and upholder of tradition and integrity for the family, marriage as a growth experience, if you're insecure, it can run amok. You won't really grow. You'll just be having all these negative feelings. And you must learn to basically trust your husband. Learn to trust your husband. And don't feel like he's cheating or he's doing something to hurt you. So learn, if your marriage is stable and happy, learn to trust your husband. Channel the intensity of these feelings, whether it's rage or jealousy or anger, into like creative pursuits. So like art, writing, painting, something that you can like metaphorically transform from one thing into another. Because that's what you're doing now. You're transforming yourself from one version of yourself to another. And be an artist instead of being constantly consumed and destroyed by these uncontrollable feelings that you may be having, these negative feelings you may be having. Reality versus myth. Another way to grow is realizing, is it real or is it myth? If you're having problems in your marriage and you may want a divorce, or he may want a separation, you have to learn how to accept things as they really are. And in order to, once you accept things as they really are, then you allow yourself to grow and to move on with your life. Because being in constant denial if he wants a separation or divorce, that keeps you stagnant. That keeps your energy stagnant. And the only person you're hurting is yourself. So accept reality and know the difference between reality and myth. And lastly, ways to grow is recycle yourself. If you're not growing, you're stagnant. And when things stagnate, they tend to wither and die. So you have to constantly keep starting again, recycling. Once you go through what I call a hard reboot, which is like a divorce or death or separation or losing your money or whatever, once you go through a hard reboot, that's the time to start again. But then next time you choose wisely. You let go of the need or the expectation to be a wife, or the expectation of this idealized version of a man that's going to make a perfect husband for you. And don't look for all of your fulfillment to be from your husband. So Hera represents the goddess of marriage and power. Her sister opposite on the goddess wheel is Persephone. And we'll talk about her and her role in this whole power structure as well. So tell me down below, what do you think? Do you resonate with the heraarchetype goddess archetype when it comes to like power and isolation, family and friends, giving up your ambitions and the things that you want to do? Now that you're in the second half of your life, what do you think you're going to do different? How has the power structure in your life changed now that you're in the middle half of your life, going into the last quarter of your life, what do you think you're going to do different? How has looking back and your friendships and your work and how Hera has done things as the dominant archetype in your life, do you think you would have did anything different? Do you think that you would do it all again the same? Or would you have been a little bit more ambitious and then allow the man, your husband or mate, to come into your life and not necessarily fulfill you, but be more of a equal partner, metaphorically, if you know what I mean? It was very hard for me to find Hera archetypes in movies and TV. You know, I like to try to give you, like, if you checked out my Artemis video, all the Artemis in movie and TV were Natiri in Avatar, Ripley in Aliens, Wonder Woman, Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games. It's very hard to find a Hera archetype because she's like the matriarch. Only thing I can think of a matriarch in the Hera archetype was like so many old TV shows like Dallas, Crystal in Dynasty. So if you're Gen X, you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to explain it. But we don't have too many. There was a TV show on BET with Lynn Whitfield. She played the matriarch for this mega. Her husband was a pastor of this mega. I think it was called Greenleaf. I believe she's a Hera archetype. She was all about her husband and making sure the church was good and elevating him and keeping the family together. Greenleaf. Lynn Whitfield was a Hera, if I'm not mistaken. Trying to think of some other ones, but you know, with our society, the family structure is broken down so much that, you know, it's very difficult to actually see women who are about marriage and family in today's TV shows. So yeah, I'm trying to think of something else, but I think that's about it as far as TV and pop culture. So I have 2 down, 5 more to go, and watch the other archetypes as well, because again, you know, Hera might be your dominant one, or even Artist might be your dominant one, but you also have 1 or 2 subordinate ones as well, especially the ones opposite on the goddess wheel to you. So for Artemis it was Athena, and for Hera it is Persephone. So we have a couple more to do. So just tell me down below what you think. Do you resonate with this video?